How to read a poem to yourself and others for more joy, healing, and even delight. Hi, this is Dale Byron. This is Heartwork Podcast, where we work with poetry. And I want to talk today and then over the next number of sessions about a very important subject, I feel. And that is how we read a poem even to ourselves, or maybe in particular to ourselves, makes all the difference in how much that poem inspires us, heals us, provides us joy and meaning in our lives. And I've discovered after, as I've said, that I've probably read at least 1 million poems by now, many of them in settings with other people, coaching settings, teaching, and speaking situations. And I've found that the way we read poetry matters greatly. I want to start with a little thought experiment along these lines. And of course, we're going to jump into a poem and do an example in just a few moments. The thought example would be this. Imagine that you had this delicious, amazing, beautiful, freshly picked strawberry that's right in your hand, right before you. And let's say that you're looking at that and you're admiring it. And what you do is you take just the tiny little nibble of the strawberry. And it tastes good. There's no doubt about that. But just the tiny little nibble. And then you throw the rest away. And you don't get to enjoy that full, complete, delicious strawberry. Well, for me, that's what happens when we take a poem that otherwise could be very meaningful, very inspiring, very healing for us. And we simply scan it on the page or read it silently, quickly, and just go on about our business. Now, I don't mean that we have to stop for hours, but what I am saying is that if we read a poem with a few kinds of principles that we're going to talk about over these next weeks, that poem can be more powerful. And I mean that for ourselves. I often, not always, but I often will take, even by myself, I'll read a poem out loud because there's something different about hearing the words. Even if, we're saying the words, reading the poems out loud makes a great bit of difference. So I've got these 8 principles that we're going to cover over the next weeks. But the very first one that I want to work with today is don't perform the poem, simply speak it. And the note I made for myself is for this principle number 1, don't perform, speak the poem, is let the poem live and breathe through you, through us, through the reading of the poem. Speak as if sharing something private and true, something precious, not putting on a show, but just giving your full self to the poem. And again, I don't mean anything fancy or rarefied. I just mean, to just put yourself into the poem and your breath into the poem. So I have a short little piece by the poet Anne Iverson. And if you've ever had a pet in your life, she's talking in this poem about a cat, but it could be any kind of pet or an animal that you've loved, that you've gotten to know, then I think this poem will have meaning for you and for us. The poem is called Plentitude, very short little poem, Plentitude by Anne Iverson. It goes like this. Even near the very end, even near the very end, the frail cat of many years came to sit with me among the glitter of bulb and glow, tried to the very last to drink water and love her small world, would not give up on her curious self, would not give up on her curious self. And though she staggered, shriveled and weak, Still she poked her nose through ribbon and wrap, and her peace and her sweetness were of such that when I held my ear to her heart, I could hear the sea. I could hear the sea. And though she staggered, shriveled and weak, still she poked her nose through ribbon and wrap, and her peace and her peace and her sweetness were of such that when I held my ear to her heart, I could hear the sea. Now, as we let those words just kind of wash over us, as we marinate in those words, as we step inside this poem to have our own experience, I can imagine that you may have been taken back to a animal that you loved, to a cat or a dog or a different animal that you absolutely loved, because this is what this poem, I think, in its fullness is able to do for us, this short little poem. Now, again, we will talk over the coming weeks about all the different things. I tried to model some of those things, to take particular pauses, if you noticed, to read lines more than once, to let the surprise in the poem just wash over us, to bring that little shock, delicious shock of amazement, as in the last lines, when we say, I held my ear to her heart and I could hear the sea. Now, those lines are deliciously surprising to me, at least. That's my feeling. And I wanted to really do great justice to those lines because as we're flowing through this poem, and then to bring the entire sea and what we hear, that kind of sacred sound of the sea, and how the protagonist in the poem, the poet, is invoking that sacred sound of the sea in this small little critter that she obviously loved. And of course, we can see from the context that this must be around a kind of it would seem a Christmas celebration, perhaps, or some celebration, because she talked about ribbon and wrap, and that's sort of the traditional kinds of things, and lights, bulb and glow. So we want to talk about the idea of just reading that poem out loud, even if we're alone, or particularly if we're alone, if we want to really dig into a poem. So again, Plentitude by Anne Iverson. Even near the very end, the frail cat of many years came to sit with me. Among the glitter of bulb and glow, tried to the very last to drink water and love her small world, and would not give up on her curious self, and would not give up on her curious self. And though she staggered, shriveled and weak, still she poked her nose through ribbon and wrap, and her peace and her sweetness were of such that when I held my ear to her heart, I could hear the sea. Now, of course, I just read that poem a second time fully. Several sections I've read more than 2 times. And I just want to say that the way you read a poem is very much bringing yourself to it. We're going to talk about different parts. One of the things is how we bring ourselves to a poem to make it more enjoyable for ourselves. And if we're reading it to others, perhaps them as well. So, again, over the next number of weeks, we're going to cover this, but we're really going to talk about the simple idea of what it means to have a poem be more joyful, more healing, more delightful for ourselves and potentially for others. That's what we're going to be talking about, because this is a way to have the poems be even more powerful, I think, to savor them. Okay. Thank you so much for your listening ear. And thanks for being here. If you like the podcast, then give a like or comment, ask a question. Any of that would be great. Tell me what poems you love to read out loud if you already have some that you do. Otherwise, until next time and next poem, please take good care of yourself. And if you can, someone else.